Good afternoon and welcome to the Charter Revision Commission meeting. The meeting will start in 60 seconds. Whenever you're ready, you hit the gavel.
It's 4 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order for the Charter Revision Commission meeting. Please call attendance.
Yes, I will. Thank you. Commission members Timian.
Here.
Aguilar.
Present.
Entenmann.
Present.
Polides.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
5 for 5. First item would be the approval of minutes of November 1st.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the minutes of the November 1st meeting of the Charter Revision Commission.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a tie for a second. Okay. Any discussion?
All those in favor vote yes.
Hearing none?
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I missed a step. No, go ahead.
Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That sounds like 5 ayes, so unanimous. Thank you. And on our agenda today, the first one is old business. And I guess what I'd like to do is to have people consider if they want to do the old business first or if we want to get through the Articles 4, 5, and 6 first. We don't have the constraints tonight that we have to be out of here by 5:45 or anything, do we?
That's correct.
Okay, so there's no time limit tonight. We can go as long as we want.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I don't know about the other members of the Commission. I'd prefer just to dispose of or get through the old business and then we can discuss the new business.
Okay, that's fine. So the first item is A would be Charter Article 2, City Council. And on that one, there are 3 bullet points, 1, 2, and 3. Discussion on 1, election by plurality. And I would think that our decision is going to be, and what we've done in the past is if we wanted an item to be considered for inclusion on a ballot, and during the various meetings we've pushed those items forward, and then in the last meeting decided which of those would actually put on the ballot. So, any comments on presented amendment regarding election by plurality? Okay, hearing none. Any discussion on presented amendment regarding voting on sales tax revenue bonds?
Mr. Chair, this is one where I would, as I said during our last meeting, I think this is an issue which on which the City Council can take action and amend the charter to deal with these issues on its own. I think they have a greater opportunity to receive arguments from the public, to consider the implications of the issue in terms of budget, finance, potential fiscal impact of holding future elections on these issues. So unless there's a burning desire among my fellow commissioners, which is fine and understandable, I would say this is one that I don't need to consider as a member of the Charter Revision Commission. I would say we could either give it to the Sioux Falls City Council or let the public continue the discussion.
Okay. Anyone else?
Mr. Chair, I do have a question. Has this come before the City Council? I see Councilor Erickson is in the audience. Could she address that question?
Thank you. Christine Erickson, Sioux Falls City Councilor. Thank you for the question. No, it has not come before the council at this point. It's all based on timing as far as if you consider it, then it's something that you would move through the process. If it's something the council considers, it cannot be done until I believe that December timeline, which it conflicts with the same time of use. So it can't be brought here and then the council is what I'm understanding. So it's either here or the council. I do understand that it's very rare that the council does bring a charter amendment forward through the council process. That's only been done, I believe, one time. So it's extremely rare for that. I respect what your decision is. If you'd rather the council take it up, I certainly understand that. But at the same time, if it is something that you all want to discuss and act upon, I have met with Attorney Danny Brown a second time to discuss some of that, but have not polished up the amendment to the point where it's ready to be presented at this time, and really just wanted to have that dialogue back with you all to see, is it something that you want to act on yourselves, or, like I said, the council? It's just extremely rare that it is within the realm of the council, and it does fall under those that section of the charter that this is something that the council can amend. It just isn't done very often.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Councilwoman, I don't want to put you on the spot with this question. If the Charter Revision Commission decided today that we were not going to act on this item and that we were going to instead leave it either in the hands of the council or the public, would you intend, or do you know if any other city council members would intend to bring it as a charter amendment through the council process?
I don't have 100% certainty with that. I would think, yes, it would be brought forward one of those two ways, since there is options with it. I think part of the conversation would be to remove the council from it and not politicize it. If it stays within the charter revision, it's left more within your hands and not maybe politicized as much. But that can be in the eye of the beholder as well. So I certainly understand that goes both ways.
Mr. Chair, could this be done by ordinance instead of on the charter?
It cannot. No. I do have a written opinion from Attorney David Fifley previously that he did look through all of it and gave me a written opinion that this cannot be changed through just simple ordinance. It does have to be sent through as a charter based on the way it's written, and maybe, Danny, you might be able to weigh in a little bit more, or I can provide you the emails that were previously sent to me.
I'm not aware of anything that contradicts that opinion from Mr. Fifley, so if you want to send me whatever you have, I'd be happy to look at it, but I don't know otherwise.
I will do that. There are other options that could be looked at, and so it's within the hands of the council that they choose to set the voting amount. I'm not here advocating for that. I'm making it a very specific proposal that is one that's very pointed just to the bonding, and that is not a broad-based with a broad brush saying all fees, all this, all that. It's a very specific area.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Item 3, removal of mayor from the city council. I guess the question would be is, do we want to consider it or not consider it? Do we want to move it forward to the one that considered as a possible ballot item, or end the consideration at this point? We can always bring it back later as well. I mean, things we could do there, but. Okay. Hearing none. Charter Article 3, Mayor. Presented amended election by majority.
Mr. Chair, I believe that if we're going to leave in for consideration the city council amendment that's been suggested, that we also leave this one in to consider.
So just to make sure I have this straight, you would say then that 3A1 and 3B1 should be paired on however we address those.
I think that that was the intent of the individual that brought it forward.
Okay.
I thought that in his narrative in the beginning is that he thought it only fair that if we were to consider the one, that we consider them both. He's willing to speak to that.
Councillor Greg Neitzer, thank you. I don't think technically they rise and fall together, obviously. One could go without the other, but it makes sense if we're going to codify one, it would make sense to codify the other. I mean, either they should both be in charter or neither, in my opinion. It wouldn't make sense to enshrine the mayor and not the council or vice versa. That would be my feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you. So would you like 3A1 and 3B1 to be considered for a possible ballot inclusion at the end of our meetings or at the end of this process?
Mr. Chair, I would ask that we consider at the final meeting putting 3A1 and 3B1 onto the ballot for a vote by Sioux Falls voters.
Thank you. And I think at this point we did this before just on consensus that we'll then have that as an agenda item. 3A1 and 3B1 from this agenda will be considered at our last meeting.
Mr. Chair, does that mean then that we are not going to consider, I think I have my pages, the Erickson amendment? We are going to leave that to be brought forward by the council.
Mr. Chair, in light of some of the comments that Councilwoman Erickson made regarding the politicization of this issue and the desire for it to be considered by the public, and in order to give the opportunity for any other potential members of the public or the City Council to provide additional input between now and our final meeting, I would support us considering 3A2 at our final meeting for consideration on the ballot.
Okay?
Mr. Chair, I would agree.
Okay. That would be,
I agree.
okay, we've got a consensus that will be, so 3A1, 3B1, and 3A2 would be, we'll discuss those again in our last meeting. We can talk a little bit about that agenda for December 1st at the end of the meeting today as to how we want to do some things on that for as far as timing. And then as I look at that, 3B2 and 3A2, removal of the mayor from the city council. (3A3) and 3B2. Is there any interest in moving that?
Mr. Chair, I hate to be the one to speak first on everything, but I would not have any reason to consider either 3A3 or 3B2 at our final meeting for inclusion on the ballot. Like you said, it can always be brought up again if there's additional arguments or information that would help convince the commission that this is something that the voters should have a chance to consider.
Okay. Is there
Mr.
anyone?
Chair, I would also agree.
Okay. Was there anyone who would like it move forward Two, okay. So then 3A3 and 3B2, for now, we've ended our work on those, and the other ones will be considered after we've made it through all 9 articles. Okay? Is everyone fine with that? Okay? So just so we have those for consideration. Then on our new business today, we start with Article 4, Departments, Offices, and Agencies. Is there anything that people would want to discuss in Article 4?
Mr. Chair, I do have a question. Under Article 4.01 B, it states here that the appointment by the mayor of any director or head of any city department shall only be effective with the advice and consent of the council. It was my understanding that the individual, the proposed director, had to have a certain percentage of the budget for the council to either give advice or consent for it. I wondered if that has changed since I was a council member. I know that we did not advise and consent for the community development or the central services. So I'm wondering if that did change. And because it's in charter, how was it changed, if it was changed?
On the copy of the charter I have,
Yeah.
I have the comments from last year, and that was discussed. It was those two because it is less than 5% of the city's employees or budget. And so those were the two that weren't included. And that was the one where we had discussed last year. I think that's where my notes are coming from. That is still my binder from last year.
I agree with you, though. You're right. This seems
So was it 2015?
Or did that get voted on last year?
I don't.
Looks
Mr.
like
Chair-
there was a change in 2016.
Okay. So what I have here for language, and I think I still have my binder from last year.
The current one would be in your attachments there.
Mr. Chair, I think you are correct, Mr. Chair, that those were the comments that were made at the, in our 2015 meetings, but the current version of the charter, section 4.01B, does say the appointment by the mayor of any director or head of any city department shall only be effective with the advice and consent of the council.
So we discussed it last year, and that it was changed.
That was the change.
That was the change. So I was reading off the charter that's a year old, so my apologies. Okay. Okay. Okay, and on article, there is a proposal, you'll see that in your handouts that are there, for 401C on Parks and Recreation Board, that the Parks and Recreation Board shall be composed of 7 members, each of whom shall be a registered voter for the city. 5 members shall be appointed, 1 member from each of the city's 5 districts that they reside in, as provided in the city charter, Article 6. And 2 members shall be appointed without regard to city council district. A member may complete their appointed term if their residency outside the district is caused during their term of office by district adjustment pursuant to the city charter 602. This section shall become effective August 1st, 2024. So fairly long way out. And I think we discussed that one, we discussed this a little bit at our last meeting. Do you want to do public input now, or we've got that for later?
Well, I believe that
Okay.
she wanted to
Okay.
present as the others did.
So I think if there's anyone who would like to talk about 401C,
Good afternoon, Teresa Staley, at-large city council member. And at your last meeting, you had requested that I bring forth a little more information about this. And after conferring with our city staff, we thought that perhaps 4.01, section 4.01 would be the appropriate place to put this. I feel strongly that this is something that the voters should have a chance to weigh in on. It was brought before the council. It was a 4-4 vote. The mayor broke the tie last summer. And the park board is a special, unique board. It handles recommendations and looks at proposals before they come to the city council. And I got to experience this firsthand this summer because I came up with this idea and met with every city council member and presented it to them, and also crafted this in a way that allows the park board members to serve out their full 2 terms. That's why it has a 2024 date up there, so that this would not discriminate against anyone who is currently serving, but it would just open this up for more representation for the whole community going forward. The mayor would still appoint the person. It would still go before the council for consideration. But I had firsthand experience with the power of the park board because I had to go before them and present this. And then they voted for it, and the park board themselves voted against opening this up to the public as far as having more representation in each district. I think the fact that the charter states that we have representation on the council from each district would, to me, transfer into the same thing with having representation on the park board. So I think you have a copy of the phase-in. You want to put that on the screen there, just to see how it worked out with all of the park board members, that they would get to serve their term. And also then you see how it was written to fit into section 401C. I did talk with Attorney Danny Brown, and he said that it could fit here, or it could fit somewhere else. He's willing to look at that. Danny, did you want to weigh in on that? He's not giving it as recommendation, but he's saying that it could fit here. Yes. So that's any questions?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Staley, is this the same wording used when you brought it before the city council?
Yes, I believe it's the same.
So you haven't made any changes?
No.
It was, okay, thank you.
And I will just tell you, having visited with people, I think there's probably people more on the south end. And right now, in the southeast, I think there are 4 park board members living in the southeast district. So, and before this, as I started to become aware of the residences of the park board, they've tended to live south of 26th Street in the south end. So when I'm visiting with people, and as I have been visiting with people from the north part of our community, this really resonates with them. So again, I'll piggyback off what Councilor Erickson said as far as politicizing this, letting it go to the people and saying, hey, this is your community. How would you like this to look moving forward? I think that makes perfect sense. So would appreciate your consideration.
Mr. Chair?
yes,
Question for the councilwoman.
Yes.
When this went through the city council and was rejected, was it being proposed as to do this by ordinance?
Yes.
All right, so this would not have been, if it had made it through the council process, an amendment to the charter.
No, at the time, no, because we did it before this happened. Yes, it was proposed as an ordinance.
If we add this as a process in charter and require that there be one member from each of the 5 council districts, do we know if there will be any fiscal impact to the city of Sioux Falls? Would it increase the time it takes to locate willing volunteer appointees to the board? Do we know that there are currently willing potential appointees to the board in each of the 5 council districts?
First of all, let's look at when people run for city council. We haven't had a problem getting candidates to run. Okay, so we do always have, well, there's been a few times when someone's been unopposed, but for the most part, we've got people coming forth. The park board, my understanding is that that is one of the most sought-after boards to be on. And I believe at one time there were 40 people on reserve who had wanted to be on the park board. It's hard to tell you exactly which district they're in because we're not given the park board applicants' names. I do believe that I've been approached by people since I've been elected across the city who would love to be on the park board. And there was I don't want to bring up negativity here, but there was a discussion about who it would be qualified for the park board. And I believe that someone who lives near a park, loves that area of their neighborhood, could be qualified. You know, we've got a growing diversification of our community. So opening this up, I think this just gives kind of a parameter of direction moving forward. And I think in all elections and in all things, when there's an opening, we can do even more to promote that. And I would encourage with the next administration that, put it in the water bill, see if the TV stations will cover it, so that you let people know about it. A lot of times they're just unaware of what's available. So as far as the financial cost, I don't see that happening at all.
Mr. Chair, follow-up question.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilwoman, for the answer. You've said a couple of times that this proposal would open it up. Today, what would prevent a mayor of Sioux Falls from appointing in this exact manner someone from each of the 5 council districts and then 2 other at-large park board members? Is there anything that would prevent this from happening
No, there's
today?
not. But again, this would just solidify it a little bit more, because you might have a mayor in the next term that says, I'm going to do this, then the mayor in the next term doesn't have to do that. So it's really no skin off anyone's back if we would have this a little more solidified. And again, I say let the voters weigh in on it. And if across our city they say, hey, we like the way it's been done, that's fine. I would accept that. I'm a big advocate of letting people have a voice at the ballot box. So that, I think it's a win-win.
Mr. Chair, one more follow-up question. Councilwoman, I'm trying to figure out, since this would amend this into the Constitution for our city, so how is the Parks and Rec Board different from all of the other citizen boards to which voters in Sioux Falls can be appointed? Why should we give this board special treatment? And is it possible that going forward we could see further proposals that either other individual boards or all citizen boards be handled in this way?
Well, and as I indicated earlier, this board handle all the proposals that come through the Parks Department. They are not approving the budget. That comes to the City Council, but they've got a lot of power in what the priorities are going to be in the projects. So I think that differentiates them from the other boards. And plus, parks are such as one of my colleagues, Councilor Neitzer, says, they're parochial. I mean, they're really broad-based that affect the whole community in such a wide variety of forms. So personally, I'm bringing this forward because I think it's important. If someone else in the plumbing board at some point says, you know, we've got to make sure we've got district representation, and, you know, they can certainly come and pitch that as well. But I've had an experience. I did the petition drive for Drake Springs 11 years ago. That was a park that was a swimming pool by my area. I'm committed to children swimming outdoors. Never had a problem with the indoor pool. But taking away an outdoor pool and making those children ride their bikes 2 to 3 miles to swim outdoors, to me, didn't make sense. So, the park board at that point said they thought it was a good idea, and I brought it to the voters. So, I mean, it's a very endearing thing. Parks, we just had the Spellerberg issue, you know, so to me, it's got a little more depth to it, or it touches people a little more deeply than like the plumbing board, to me. So. Any more questions? Thank you.
Thank you. So, on 401C.
Ms. Chair, I did have a question for the city attorney's office, and if it needs to be considered between now and the next meeting, that's fine too. But I don't know if we want to take further public testimony before I ask that question. Okay.
I'm Bruce Danielson. In this situation with the Parks Board, it is a special board of the city. These individuals are chosen for 5-year terms. They get 2 of them, 10 years on the board. And in that time period, a lot can change in the park system and in the parks. And we've had I did the research and found that at the time I had done the research, that all of the members of the Parks Board were residents 33rd Street and South in Sioux Falls. Last year, we had a discussion concerning the destruction that was going to happen to Terrace Park. Instead of going in and keeping that park as the jewel that it had always been in Sioux Falls, they were going to be going in and ripping out all of the cobblestone and all the quartzite and putting in concrete. Well, that's when I started really looking at the makeup of the board and going back as far as I could in history and finding out that none of the people that were actually on the Parks Board ever spent any time in Terrace Park. Then I started looking and seeing that there were really only this select group of people in the south part of town that never went in the north end of town. We looked at the small park up right across from St. Michael's Cemetery and looked at the mess that park was in for so many years. And it's still not much of a park, but it's all that they have. Well, if you don't go to those neighborhoods, and I'm going through town every day in different parts of town with the work I do, and I see what's going on in these different parks. So I start asking questions, and these people are very upset because they're ignored, and they feel like they're being ignored. So then started asking, where are these board members at? And I started attending park board meetings and recording the park board meetings, and I put it up online so people can actually see what's been going on and what's been talked about. And you get comments that are made off the record in these meetings, because prior to my recording them, none of these meetings were ever recorded. And you find out the comments that are made are as if some people don't seem to deserve it because we don't see it, so why should we care about it? And all of a sudden we start losing all these jewels in all these little parks. You go out in some of these new neighborhoods that are being built, and there's a little plot of land set aside, and they throw some playground equipment in it, but there's not even trees in some of these things. These people don't like these parks. Sure, we go and have so many, let's say we're half a mile from a park, no matter where you are in town, or some artificial number. Well, it ends up being a place that you can't even play baseball on. You can't even have a soccer game. You have to drive somewhere to go to a park, and most of these are either in the southeast part of town, the south part of town, or where there's a lot of growth happening, where people assume it's more affluent. I work in a lot of these areas of town. I know a lot of these places aren't affluent, but there's a misunderstanding, and when you have everybody living in certain areas making all these decisions, these 7 members of the Parks Board go to a lot of parts of town that never get seen in the northeast, northwest, the north end, and it's sad. So I really support this. I really work and would like to see a chance to put this on. I've actually even looked at doing a petition drive to put this on the ballot. That's how strongly the feelings are in this town that this needs to be voted on. So I've had a lot of people ask me to do it. I'm hoping that the Charter Commission allows this to move forward. Thank you.
Hi, Rex Rolfing, City Councilor at Large. I wasn't going to talk today about any of this, but I couldn't let this go. I feel pretty strongly on the other side of the issue from my fellow councilor, Staley, and Mr. Danielson. The people that were chosen for this committee are there for a reason. The last one went through a lot of scrutiny by the mayor and by us to be appointed to this, because they have a love for parks, they have a love for the system, and they know that we've got one of the best park systems in the country, and they want to keep it up. We talk about uniqueness. This is a unique committee, if you will. To a certain extent it is, but there's a lot of them. I serve on one that puts this to shame in that the UDC committee helps determine what road projects and some park projects and some trailway projects, et cetera, get done around the MPO in the Sioux Falls area. The one that's going to be bid in the next 2 weeks is the largest project that the Department of Transportation has ever taken on. $60 million to finish Veterans Parkway all the way up to Interstate 90. So when we're talking about money and power, if you will, and the ability to make things happen, there are a number of committees that deal with the same kind of magnitude, if you will. I would also say I don't know that there's been an overinvestment in Southeast Sioux Falls or South Sioux Falls, simply because people live there. That's where the people are moving to. And so I don't know that that's a real big one. One thing that really kind of I think could happen very easily if this goes through, and that is that, people talk about we don't want to politicize this. Think about the pressure that could be brought on someone from on the southeast, from someone on the northeast district, to really, I'll give you this next time if you'll give me this time. Instead of thinking about what's really good for the whole, for all of the people of Sioux Falls, as we're going through a budget process and looking at long-term parks and the park system in the city of Sioux Falls. I think that could just be some real problems in the long run, where you're gonna get a lot of pressure from those people to do things for their district. And so I think that can be alleviated, taken care of, okay? And the other way that this can be taken care of, very simply, is that the council not approve a person being appointed if they don't think they're going to do a good job, number one, and maybe if they want to do it that way, say, Mr. Mayor, we need somebody from the north end. Give us somebody from the north end or we're not going to approve it. That could be a very simple process. Very, very simple way to do this. If this goes to a charter revision, I would just about guarantee you that people will not understand the ramifications and what could possibly happen, the long-term consequences of this. So I would urge you not to approve this, not to go forward with it at this time, and well, be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments from 401 on 401C?
Mr. Chair. Question for Mr. Brown, the City Attorney's Office. Looking at the charter, it's my understanding under Article 4 that the only department of the city that is enacted by the charter is the Office of the City Attorney. And the mayor is otherwise empowered to create and disband municipal departments as he or she sees fit, and they're empowered to do that under Article 4 of the charter. As far as I can tell, by adding this language related to the Parks and Recreation Board, it would seem to potentially enact in the charter the existence of the Parks and Recreation Board, and if not, at the very least, would be the second of only two departments of the city that is mentioned and has some kind of rules in the charter. Does that coincide with your understanding of how Article 4 works? And if the City Attorney's Office wants to get back to me on that, that's fine.
I could certainly take the time and get back to you on it, but what you said is consistent with what I believe and how it works.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on 401C?
Mr. Chair, from my standpoint, given the fact this issue has been considered by the City Council and rejected at this time, given the fact that the City Council has the power to bring it back up at any time, and also if they wanted to propose an amendment to Article 4 of the Charter, which would be enacted immediately upon passing the City Council and would not have to go through a vote on the ballot. For my part, I would not see any need to consider this at our final meeting for inclusion on the 2018 ballot.
Any other comments?
I agree.
Thank you. Anything else on Article 4? Okay, hearing none. Article 5, financial procedures. Any of the sections anyone wants to discuss? In Article 6, departments, offices, and agencies.
Mr. Chair, I think we're on Article 6 elections, correct?
Yes, I have my sheets wrong. Sorry about that.
All right.
Article 6, elections.
I know, Mr. Chair, in our packet of materials, we did receive some information on a Wikipedia article entitled Instant Runoff Voting, otherwise known as ranked voting or ranked elections, ranked ballots.
Yes, that was presented. I think on the first time I served on this, we discussed the instant runoff and ranked voting, and at that time it did not pass to move forward with that, but it would be an item for consideration now. There's a lot of literature out there on this subject with both pro and con on it. It would be interesting, near as I could tell, that the rank voting works fairly well when there's up to 4 candidates, but when it gets to more than 6, it makes it very difficult. I think it's what some of the results have said, because people don't want to rank that far.
Mr. Chair, are you bringing this forward then?
No. It was just that it was put forward as an item for us to consider.
Mr. Chair, the feeling at that time was, because of that, how involved that topic was, that if there would be some group in Sioux Falls who would like to sit down and study it and see how it would impact the elections here in Sioux Falls, then we would be able to go forward. But there's no group at this point, evidently, that is interested.
Okay. So at that point, it did not have any momentum to move forward for consideration, but it was presented again, so I thought I'd at least bring it up. And I'm not hearing anything at this time. Is there anything else on Article 6 on elections? Okay. And at this point, we'd have time for public input. Hearing none.
I wanted to speak on a couple of the amendments that are up, that are proposed, and I wanted to. I was unable to attend some of your first meetings, so I apologize for that. And learning about these as they come by, I've had some real concerns. Number one, the plurality versus majority vote. The council did vote on that. It was brought by me, and I'm very proud to have it brought by me because I think it's important to have people be elected by as many people as possible, not by a minority. In some situations, we're looking at potential of 66% of the people not having their voices heard and 34% having their voice heard with their candidate. I don't think that's right. I didn't think it was right when I was elected that way and didn't feel good about it. Even though I was up at about 46%, something like that, 45% on the first one, still didn't feel right that I was not elected by a majority of the constituency of the city of Sioux Falls. It's kind of the tail wagging the dog situation. We're not going to run into one of the people. Some of the people have said that, well, we're going to run into a lot of expenses if we have to have all runoff elections. And I think since 2002, when we did it, it would have caused this, having this in effect, the way it is right now, having a majority vote, it would have caused one additional runoff election since 2000, since the year 2000. So in 17 years, we would have one additional election. I think that's a small price to pay for democracy, very small. The other thing people talk about is the money it might take to run for an extra 2 or 3 weeks afterwards. Well, yeah, it will cost a little bit more. It will. But the 2 largest fundraisers last year in the last election didn't get on a ballot. So it didn't make any difference to them. So money isn't necessarily what it takes to get elected. What it takes is people being out and pressing flesh, saying hi to people, going to events, getting their story told. And you can do that a whole lot of different ways, and that don't take a lot of money. Because I ran a pretty lean budgeted campaign myself. Okay. Some opponents would use the example of the governor and some not congressmen, but legislators, county commissioners, et cetera, being elected that way. But those are generally in early elections, not in the election, primary elections, that kind of thing, to select a candidate. And so we do move forward then, and they do have to have a majority vote to get really elected to those positions. I'm not going to go any farther on this one, but the majority requirement has been in place since 2000. Yeah, well, that's what I said, we'd only have one election since 2000. So I'm gonna leave it at that and see if there's any questions. I do have another one I wanted to visit about.
Mr. Chair, it's my understanding, are you talking about that there would be one additional special election?
Yeah.
But more than one candidate over that time span, or one counselor would have had to run a second time?
No.
Well,
It would have been, yes, there would have, yeah, I'm sorry, yes.
A number
But we
that-
would have had an election anyway because there's going to be one in the mayor's race.
because of the mayoral election is
Correct.
what you're saying. But there would only have been one instance where there would have been a special election called, but there would have been a number of candidates that would have to run a second time.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep. I hope I made that clear. I obviously did not, but thanks for clarifying that.
Thanks.
Any other questions? I want to visit also about the supermajority bond issues or sales tax use. None of you are old enough. Maybe, Pauline, I don't want to say this and get in trouble with you, but any of you around when we voted 4 or 5 times for Lincoln High School? Yeah. And it was ridiculous. We're at 50%, 55%, 58%, 59%, and then finally 60 or 61% on the, I think it was a 5th ballot. You know, this is the kind of thing that we could get into with this. You know, the state, in all their wisdom, legislated limits on the debt that cities can have. I don't know if you're aware of that. Category 1 is 5% of the assessed valuation of all the property in the city of Sioux Falls, which can be bonded by the city without a vote of the people. Right now, in Sioux Falls, there is about, what is it? Available legal, about $2 trillion, almost $3 trillion worth of value. As I read this, we can, the first limit that is put on there is an amount of about $624 million, 5%. The second one and the third categories are at 10% and 8% of that valuation, but they automatically require a vote of the citizenry. Not too bad. Pretty good safeguards, I would say, that things are not going to get out of hand with debt. Right now, City of Sioux Falls is using about 53% of the first category, general purpose. Overall, we're using about 12% of the total debt that we could incur. That's it. We're not overspending. We're not over-debting, over-obligating the people of Sioux Falls. And I don't think we need to have a supermajority on a council where, again, the tail can wag the dog with 2 people saying no to a project or something that might be very beneficial, such as Lewis and Clark. Something like that could be put on hold forever by 2 individuals. And so it's just something that I don't think is needed. Sioux Falls has always been responsible in its borrowing via bonding. That's why we have such a high bond rating. I don't know if you're aware, but we have one of the highest bond ratings in the country when we go out to sell bonds. This, to me, is overregulation, and could and will stifle progress in the city of Sioux Falls. Folks, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public input?
Bruce Danielson again. I just want to clarify something, I guess, so that there aren't any misunderstandings, that people aren't stupid. When you individuals have recommended charter amendments over the years, and you've thought it out, you've brought it up here, and I believe all but one of the charter amendments since 1994 have been adopted by the people, and we've made it work, and we've adjusted. We're looking at the situation with the messing around with plurality versus majority. We have, right now, I've been studying all of the election results going back a long time in Sioux Falls. And each time we have a mayoral election, the highest number we've ever gotten is around 30% of the voters. We find that there's an undervote or a drop-off when it goes from the mayor down to the city council elections, where we probably get about half of whatever the mayor gets actually goes down and votes for an at-large. When you go into each of the 5 districts, there's even a smaller number. So when we go and set up for the election, we already know that if we have 25,000 people show up, we're going to get somewhere around 12,500 to 14,000 people who actually will take the time to go down one more blank and mark an at-large. People don't want to vote for the at-large. So the things that have been brought up in the city council discussion and even here today are that we don't feel good about winning an election by a plurality versus a majority. The plurality is what's happening already, or less than plurality, because maybe we've got 112,000 voters in the city of Sioux Falls. We're only going to have maybe 12,000 of those are actually going to cast a vote for a position on the city council. And if they don't get a majority of those, we have to go to a runoff. There's going to be even less people showing up and voting for the second runaround. So all of a sudden, we're going down from maybe having 12,000 votes making a decision, and those are usually pretty well thought out votes, down to maybe 6,000 or 7,000 people showing up the second time to vote. This is very common all over the country when it comes to these kinds of votings. I've been involved in elections for 51 years, and I've watched these things. I sit and I've been an election judge many times, both here and out of Sioux Falls counties. I've watched this process, and the undervote thing has to be really considered. So to make this decision that we have to have this artificial majority of an artificial number makes no sense whatsoever. I would really like to see it go back to being a plurality system. Thank you.
I didn't plan on speaking today, but I was drawn in to the debate. I'll give you, my name's Janet Brecky, and I actually implemented the original language when the charter was first passed. And so just to give you a little historical perspective on the 34%, it was an entry issue. Because at the time, even I was wondering about, as we implemented the charter, why we would have 50% for the mayor and 34%, for the council positions. And the reason was that the council position was designed to be part-time. It was tried to have a broad entry, entry into the field to encourage there to be multiple candidates to run. It was tried to be consistent with having a job and then having the council being a part-time job. It was a public servant kind of position that was designed. And so that's why the 34 makes sense. That's why it makes sense to have a lesser standard for council members than the mayor. It's clearly going to cost more. It might not cost the city more. I'm not here to say whether it costs the city more or not to run the runoff elections, but I know it's going to cost the candidates more to fund them, and that does become an entry issue. And the other question, the other issue that as it occurs to me as I sit there and I listen to this, it's already been passed in ordinance. This, to me, is a classic example of something that should be an ordinance and not in the charter. The charter is the Constitution, has broad policy statements. You fill in the blanks in the ordinances. It's in ordinance. It's an effective ordinance. I'm confused as to why it's even being brought before the Charter Revision Commission. Because here's the other issue. It might need to be changed back. And I'm not saying that it does, but after you study the elections, you know, I'm going to be the first one. I'm the guinea pig. Why would the Charter Revision Commission plop it into the charter before it even was tested to see if it's a good idea or not? After 2 or 3 election cycles, maybe it will chill entry. Maybe we'll have less candidates running. Maybe we'll need to do things to encourage more candidates to run. Maybe they'll get too expensive. That seems to me to be common sense, to let the thing run its course and find out what implications it has. You know, I can tell you it has implications on me because I know as a candidate who is recently announced that, yeah, it's going to cost me more to fund this race than I planned. And, you know, so I guess my final 2 cents worth on the thing is, you know, at a minimum, it would seem inappropriate for the charter revision to pass it premature, to put it into the charter at all, but as long as it's an ordinance, let's have a history. And that's why it's an ordinance, because it may need to be changed. There may need to be all kinds of other changes. So these aren't the kinds of things that, in my opinion, are appropriate to put in the charter. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Teresa Staley again. I think this does need to go on the charter. And the many years I have been voting for city council members, I've never had anybody say, gee, that person didn't get 51%, they're not legitimate. Never. D. Knudsen was elected with 30-some percent. I mean, there's several. I read them off at the meeting when we had this proposed. Lots of people were served our community with less than 51%, and no one ever said they were not a legitimate council member. This was proposed in a quick effort as an amendment. It wasn't vetted out with our public. Councilor Relfing threw it in as an amendment. There was no first or second reading on it. So to say it was an ordinance really isn't true. It was piggybacked into a housekeeping amendment with election cleanup. So I would just ask you to let the citizens weigh in on this, because this is really about how they're choosing their elected leaders and letting them vote on this and putting it into something that's going to be protected down the road. I don't think we need to go through several election cycles with having that 51% mandate. And also last night we just had our city clerk tell us about the cost of elections. And the runoff election, he said, runs, I think it said about $78,000. So we expect that in a mayoral cycle. But when I ran, there were 4 of us who ran in 2016. We would have been forced into a runoff that would have cost taxpayers almost $80,000. So I don't think it was broke. And I'm grateful that Councilor Neitzer brought this forward, and I was excited that you're going to keep it on the docket till the end, at least to keep considering it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, the next item on the agenda is open discussion. Is there anything that any of the members would like to discuss? Okay, we're going to have, our next meeting is December 1st, and December 1st, 6th? Oh, glad I said that then. December 6th. And then did we have a follow-up meeting to that as well?
20th.
And the 20th. And so as we look at this, on the 6th, we can go over those three. We could have a preliminary discussion as to where we're at on items that we want, and with the idea that on the 20th, we could be one where we'd have things in ballot form that we'd want. Does that seem to make sense for a work plan? Okay. Anything else?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
But we do have the opportunity in January if we need to have a meeting.
I think we need to have an official meeting in January as well. I think that's the way the...
You'll need to have a meeting to pass the final report, to approve that final report.
Yes.
And so if we draft that after the 20th, then you probably would want to meet the early January
Normally
meeting.
a fairly quick meeting, but it'll be in January. Because I think remember that from before, is that we had to meet, we had to have a January meeting.
Right, and don't we have to do something with minutes too?
So our next meeting will be December 6th. We have a follow-up on the 20th, and then January 3rd?
Whenever you decide, you haven't
What
decided.
are the Januaries? Okay, well, we can work on the January date. So, anything else? Meeting adjourned.